When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Good morning to you, world. How are we? I'm feeling all full of energy, and we have got a guest who I've been chatting to today who's also full of energy. So when you get two sort of middle-aged men, I don't know if he's middle-aged, but I hope he is, so I don't feel bad about myself, full of energy, you're going to have a great show. And he is a man who is simply brilliant at knowing how to build relationships in business. Instead of doing what every other person does when they try to build connections, and the valued connections, our guest knew that he had to step away from the crowd and do things a little differently. He started his entrepreneurial life whilst attending Malone University when he started selling world-famous Cutco Cutlery. And for him, it was a job that he was good at. But it took a chance request by a father of a girl he was dating that exploded his success. Her dad asked if he could engrave his name on a knife, which took a standard knife and turned it into something more personable, different, and therefore valued by the recipient. And this one action showed him the power of giving value to building relationships. In 5 short years, he then went on to break nearly every sales record for Cutco distributors and landed himself in the Hall of Fame. The Cutco Hall of Fame. Go him. He did it all before graduating and is now Cutco's #1 distributor of all time out of over 1 million distributors in the company's 60-year history. And with success breeds success, and with the confidence achieved of doing things his own way, he then created as co-owner of Ruhlin Partners, a small private equity firm with interests in various companies, including Ruhlin Promotion Group. He's the co-author of the best-selling book Cutting Edge Sales, a husband, a father, and he's a sought-after speaker on the topic of relationship development and strategic gift giving. So how did he plan to go this route when he started out, or did he have different dreams of what he wanted to achieve? And did he have people around him that supported his efforts, or was it all down to himself? Well, we're going to find out as we bring onto the show to start joining up dots, the one and only Mr. John Ruhlin. How are you, John?
I am fantastic, David. I feel like I should be floating onto the show. Wow, thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you on because I'm looking at a picture of you now and you're waving a knife in my direction. And so like a kind of mad Jack Nicholson you look like on this one for any of the sort of 80s guys who would have grown up with Mr. Nicholson. And so I'm always going to be nice to you. Whatever you say on this show, I'm going to be polite to you, John.
I can imagine it's a little freaky, a little fun, but very memorable, which is the purpose of it.
It is. It's a wonderful picture, isn't it? I was looking for pictures of you this afternoon for the show notes, and I always like to see a picture that I'm talking to, because generally on Skype that we do the recordings on, you get a kind of little white square, or you don't generally get a picture. It's just a blank canvas. And I think, yeah, this is the first time that I've seen somebody that's got such kind of, in the nicest way, you've got the kind of evil eyes in this picture, which knows that you've got some kind of power going on with this knife. You look like you're loving brandishing this knife. Do you remember taking this photo?
Oh, absolutely. It was one of those candid photos for the cover of a local magazine, and they used it inside the magazine. And when I saw it and showed it to a couple people, they're like, "You have to use that photo." Like, your smile. It is a little bit freaky, but people know me for my big, huge smile. Like I'm typically quick to laugh and quick to smile, and the knife is, even though that's not the only thing that we represent anymore, it's what we're known for, and so it's kind of that signature pick that kind of encapsulates a little bit of everything.
I'm going to get a photo like that. I don't know what I'm going to have in my hand, but I feel like I need a picture that really demonstrates who I am. What should I have in my hand, or is that a bad thought to be having on the mic?
I mean, yeah. What do you like to do when you're not on the mic? What's the passion, or what's the outside dream or goal? Or
I like to.
so a big old pillow in hand. I mean, I guess you could. Yeah. What's whatever encapsulates who you are. I mean, that could work.
Because you're a father of two, and you've got young. Was it daughters? You was telling me before we started recording.
Yeah, 1.5 and 3.5. So sleep actually sounds like very enticing and very like I could be very passionate about that because I'm very deprived right now.
So how do you balance your success? Because you've got the kind of success that when I was reading about you, I thought this man must travel. He must be traveling around America, doing what he does, getting up and doing his strategic gift-giving speaking. How do you do that and sort of separate yourself from your family? Or are you of that kind of level now that they basically come to you?
No, I mean, I would say that if I'm candid, it's a constant balancing act and struggle. I've gotten way better at the first couple years of marriage before we had kids. I was probably traveling 15 or 20 days out of the month. I got it now down to about 9 or 10 days out of the month, so more reasonable. But it's amazing how when you have a young family and the demands, you get way more focused and way more creative than you did when you were single because you could just work more hours, and that's not an option anymore. And so, there's times where I fall on my face, and my wife is like, "You got to, like no more trips." But in general, she's pretty supportive of in knowing that work and you don't take things for granted, and you go out and make hay while the sun shines. So we're taking advantage of it right now.
And having a young family, has that made you more ambitious? I tell you, for my situation, if I could do what I'm doing now and do it over 2 days and then take the rest of my life off, I would do. Absolutely. But there was a time in my life that I was career driven to the point that I was never at home. So having a family has totally flipped it on its head for me. And are you the same, or are you somebody that is still frighteningly ambitious, really wants to have the success, but also wants to have the balance in their life?
Yeah, I think it's made me question maybe some of the dreams or the passions or why I'm doing things, and making sure I'm not getting to the top of the ladder and saying, man, I made it to the top, but it's on the wrong building kind of a concept. So I would say that having 2 daughters and thinking about weddings and thinking about maybe university or college and all the different expenses, it's amazing how cheap I could live when I was single, and how even living, moderately relative to some of my peers, how fast the money can go with a family. So I would say in some ways it's made me take a step back and maybe slow down in certain areas, but it's also made me dream a little bigger, because what I thought I could raise a family on is it's taking more like double or triple that. And that's not even going crazy. So I would say both, if I'm honest.
Well, I'll be honest with you, John. They're only 1 and 2, and you're thinking about weddings already. You're trying to. My youngest one is 9, and I was saying to her today, "When are you leaving home? When are you moving out?" And she was saying, "I'm never leaving home." And I've said the same to my 23-year-old, who's going to be 24 in a couple of days' time, and she said the same thing. So I don't think weddings is going to be your problem. The problem is going to be getting them out of your life.
That's very well possible. I can see that they will hopefully want to stay close to home. My wife is definitely a homebody. We moved to St. Louis to be near her family and their 3,500 acre farm, and so family is definitely important to us. But I think because I hang out with people that are quite a bit older than myself, and I see and I hear their gripes and things that they're challenged with, and I don't want to be in a position where I'm not prepared for some of those those big moments in life, and so it just you start doing the math on things, what they cost now, and 20 years from now, it's like, oh my gosh, I have a ways to go, but I'm also I don't want to be blindsided, so.
It's another way of boosting contraception, I suppose, isn't it? If you give all the kids out there a calculator and tell them what their life's going to be like. We used to go out every single night. We used to go to the pictures or the movies, as you called it over in America, and all that kind of stuff. And now we sort of go Netflix. Netflix is all right for us, and a bag of Doritos, and that's sort of our life. Wouldn't have it any other way. But if I'd known beforehand what I know now, God, I might have said no, John, on those special cuddles.
Well, my mom is one of 13 kids, so I grew up around big families, and so we have 2. We're talking about number 3, and we're hoping to get to 4. But to me, when I'm sitting on the rocking chair someday on a back porch with a glass of lemonade or whatever else, your kids are your legacy. So as much as I can't imagine how my mom did it and my parents did it with 6 kids. I think we're not going to stop at 2. Although, the calculator definitely makes you stop at a number that a little less than what I thought originally when I was single and hadn't started raising any little ones. That's for sure.
You will be the worst dad, won't you, ever, when they start bringing boyfriends home. If you're sitting there on that porch with your big knife and that grin. Or is that going to be the best dad? I don't know.
I guess it depends upon the kid, and I mean, we grow up. I grew up on a farm, and so did my wife. So hunting and hunting was like a rite of passage into the family. So guns and knives and all of those sorts of things. Even though I live near the city, I'm out in the country. So I guess it depends upon if it's a city kid or a country boy or whatever comes to the door. But a city kid could have a rude awakening come into our house. That is for sure.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. Frighten them as soon as they come up the driveway.
I sure hope so. Sure hope so.
We're on the same sheet on that one. So let's start taking you back into your life. And you've always been entrepreneurial. It just seems now, looking at what you've achieved, that there was just a salesman in you that understood value. And I say it flippantly, it seems as simple as that, but you've done so well with those 2 things.
Yeah, what's funny is, I mean, you talk about connecting the dots. I grew up being on a farm. When you grow up more poor, you're just always kind of hustling or thinking about how you can, make a few dollars. And so working on the farm was one way, but I started out selling candy in school. And so, and I think my grandpa being entrepreneurial, even though he was very successful, he was also super humble, but I learned a lot from him and his stories. And so, yeah, I think it was kind of hidden in my DNA, because if you would have asked me when I was 10 or 15 if I was entrepreneurial, I'd never have heard of the word, let alone thought that I was an entrepreneur or even a salesperson for that matter. But looking back now, I can see that it was definitely, a dormant gene or whatever you want to call it. It was definitely there.
I've only just started developing what I call the hustle muscle. And what I say to everyone now, even if you think you haven't got that ability to hustle, when you start doing it and you start doing it on a daily basis, it's like you are building up biceps. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes naturally you. And now I look at myself from the last 6 months, I'm a totally different person. And I never thought I would be entrepreneurial. I never thought I would have the drive to succeed in the way that I'm trying at the moment. I was a kind of go with the flow kind of guy. So are you like me, that although you had it in you, do you think people can actually develop the hustle muscle and start training themselves to be good at it?
I think absolutely. I think whether it's the hustle muscle or the giving or being generous or appreciation muscle, I think there's a lot of things that people will say that's not me. And I would say I was the yes person. I was the get straight A's in school, the pleaser, which I think I've leveraged those things in my business and in my entrepreneurial career. But in general, yeah, I could have a great one-on-one conversation with somebody, but the idea of getting up and speaking publicly to executives or any of those sorts of things was the farthest thing from my mind. I would have laughed, because it's even to this day, to go up and speak publicly, my stomach is in knots. Now, nobody in the audience realizes that, but it's definitely something I've had to just through sheer determination, just kind of push my way through it, because I realized it was a platform that allowed me to reach a lot more people. And I think hustle is that same way. It's the more people you're around that are that way, they just kind of help work that muscle on a regular basis, and you don't even realize that it's happening.
I'm going to tell you a story which will frighten you, because if you're like me, I'm very used to doing public speaking, and I kind of grew the audience little by little by little. So I'm going to ask a question first of all. Can you remember the first sort of size of the crowd that you ever did any kind of public speaking in front of?
I can remember the smaller, like in an office setting type first one, and I can remember the more public in an auditorium type one. Yes, I can remember both of them for sure.
And so what sort of size are we talking about? Say the office first of all.
The office was probably 30 to 40 people.
And the auditorium?
Closer to 1,000.
I was talking to Tom Ziglar the other night, who is the son of Zig Ziglar, the motivational guy. And the very first time that he had to public speak, he was the, I think he's the president of the training department for Zig Ziglar. And they said, Tom, we need you to get up and do a presentation. And he said, well, that's not really my thing. I don't really want to do this, And they said, well, we think it's about time that you did this. So he couldn't get out of it and he had to prepare. First time he stepped on stage in front of 15,000 people. Now, that's scary, isn't it?
That would, I think most people, including myself, would hyperventilate, or I think the throwing up before you go on stage kind of thing is at least for me what would probably have taken place if that was the case.
Did you look back on your life now? Because I sort of said in the introduction that you're middle-aged, but you're not middle-aged. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 34.
Okay, you're 34. I'm 44, so I've got 10 years on you. I could be your dad. No, I couldn't. That would just be wrong. That would be terrible. Although I heard this thing today, and somebody told me, and this, I don't know why I'm even saying this on this show, but what is the world record for the youngest grandmother ever? What do you reckon that is?
40.
22. The daughter was 11, youngest, and she was 11.
Like I can't imagine being a parent at 22, let alone a grandparent. That's wow. That's a interesting. I'll use that factoid in some conversation in the next week or two.
Yeah, next time you're speed dating or doing anything, you use that fact.
Speed dating. I don't know if my wife will appreciate that when she listens to the interview, but yes, at some way, shape, or form, that will get used.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm going to use. So yeah, so sort of getting back to your sort of nuts and bolts. Does it sort of surprise you that you are now 34 years old? How much you have achieved in your sort of years from basically graduating from university? Because you really sort of you put me to shame, really, John. I look at you and I think, what the hell was I doing? Now, you just seem to have packed so much in. You've got like 2 or 3 different companies running. You're in the Cutco Hall of Fame. Who would want better than that? You're a published author and all those kind of things. Does it sort of surprise you when you're laying in bed and you sort of put your hands behind your head and you think, yes, I've done well?
And so to think about traveling around the world and working with professional sports teams and, startup companies and big companies, and I do pinch myself and say, this is pretty crazy, because it wasn't a part of the master plan going into college by, even a figment of my imagination.
And that thing about the dad asking for his name to be on the knife. Did you look back and, as we class it on this show, say that was my big dot? That was the point where my life changed so unexpectedly. Would that be right, or would there be other ones that you might go, no, actually, that situation was more important to my development?
Yeah, well, I think for me, that was definitely one of the moments. But I think the first moment occurred when I was about 17 or 18. It kind of a major direction change as far as, you call it spirituality, call it faith. But I gave my life to Christ. And that was like the turning point where all of a sudden my decision making and what I was doing kind of went in a completely different direction. It changed the college I was going to go to. And then because of that small, change of direction, going to the small Christian school, I ended up meeting Paul, my girlfriend at the time, her dad. And I think that was a major shift in overall mindset, because I saw this very successful attorney, but I saw him act way differently towards people and view success. And I think that was, so it was kind of that 17-year-old time period. And then when I was 21 and I started interning with Cutco to put myself through college, when I really started having some serious conversations with Paul, and when he shared about the knife. He shared about taking care of, spouses of his clients versus just taking care of the client. When I saw him give away, radical things like he would buy a year's supply of noodles and give everybody at church the next Sunday literally a year's supply of noodles. Or he would buy a third of the raffle tickets for the local school for a charity auction, win the Harley Davidson, and then donate the Harley back to the school. I saw him just give without strings attached. That was a major shift. So I think the knife thing it was as much as the idea, it was that he believed in me. That was a major shift because my parents thought I was crazy trying to put myself through school selling knives. Like they thought that was insane. And they owned Cutco for like 30 years at that point. So you can imagine like going and having your conversation with mom and dad and saying, hey, this is what I want to do. And they're like, nobody that we know could afford those. Are you crazy? So I think for me, it was it's definitely been my life has unfolded differently than I expected. And there's been multiple times, and even since then, where just the slightest, direction change based upon a conversation that I had, it's taken me in a completely, different stratosphere.
But you seem very focused in your inner needs and your inner wants. Just the fact that a young man over here, really religion isn't that popular, to be honest, in the United Kingdom. I don't know anyone personally of my age who sort of goes to church. It's kind of an old person's. I know it's very different in America and certainly in the sort of deep south and all those kind of areas. But was it a sort of religious area at that time where you were, or were you sort of slightly away from your peer group on what you actually personally believed?
I think there was definitely, it's definitely more commonplace in the U.S., but I think I grew up kind of going to church, but it was just kind of a tradition type thing where you just kind of went because your parents went, and there is no strong core belief, or, it wasn't a decision I was making growing up. So I think that I had some peers that I respected that started to invite me to some different Bible studies and some different things that really started to stir inside my soul, your heart, your conscience, whatever you want to call it. And so when I went to the college that I went to, that definitely, I surrounded myself on purpose with people that were, more of that, cut from that same cloth. But I think that I'm not from the deep South. I'm from the Midwest, and I think there's definitely a lot more people that are leaving the church, and churches, in many ways, in certain areas, dying, even in the U.S. more than it's growing. And so I think it's something that, probably a lot different than the UK, but definitely something that was my own doing as far as choosing to put myself around those sorts of folks. But the spark was not my doing. It wasn't something I was seeking out when I was 17. That's for sure.
So it's almost like the classic blueprint you're giving me here, that you have had a mentor. You had this gentleman, Paul, who really sort of gave you focus on what can be achieved. You then surrounded yourself with other like-minded individuals. You found ways to provide increased value to your customers. That's a kind of way that you've got to do it, isn't it? Literally every conversation that I have with the movers and shakers pretty much give the same story.
Yeah, I think the books you read and the people you surround yourselves with, I don't know if that's a Zig Ziglar quote or whose quote that is, but I think those are the two most important influences in your life. So if you're filling your head full of good things, whether it's through podcasts or through books or audiobooks or whatever, and then being careful about who's speaking life into you and who's encouraging you and who's exposing you. I mean, I think, what is it? Your income will be within 5% of the 10 people you hang out with the most. It just natural success breeds success. And so I think I didn't realize that when I was doing it, but fortunately I had some of the right mentors and people that kind of selected me to take me under their wing, or they saw potential, or it was a God thing. I don't know, but it was definitely something that kind of happened, I think, a little bit on accident. But once I got a taste of it, I definitely was tried to put myself in the driver's seat and surround myself with those sorts of influences on a regular basis on purpose, not on accident.
Well, what's weird, though, is that so many people buy these books, so many people buy these training courses, so many people listen to these podcasts, but then don't do anything with that motivation. They'll be listening to it. I was speaking to a chap the other day, and he's a lovely bloke called Leo, one of my listeners, and he came through to me and he said, would you mind having a word with me? And I went, yep, no problem at all. And he told me on this conversation that just because he was going to speak to me and he'd been listening to the content, he started assessing how he could change his life for the better. And if you're listening, Leo, we're going to contact each other again and again and again and again. I'm not going to let you go because I want great things for you. And he said, just because he was building up to having a chat with me, he looked back in his drawer and he found like this CD where he'd been to a life coach 2 years beforehand. And he said, I listened to it and I thought, I haven't done one thing that bloke's told me, even though that he paid for the chap's help to get him started on his dream life. He just paid for the money, took the course, and then didn't do anything with it. It's fascinating why people do that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I think it's probably 1 to 5% of the people that are listening are actually going to take the ideas and actually incorporate them and actually go through to have the discipline and the perseverance, because it's not easy to change habits, that's for sure.
Would that frighten you if you've come and gone on this earth and you haven't been one of those 1%ers?
Oh, I think that's honestly, I think if I look back, one of my biggest driving forces is at the end of my life, whether that's today or 50 years from now, is I feel like I've been blessed with so much that to have not leveraged, the blessings and the talents and the things I've been given is what gets me up in the morning when I don't want to, or it's what, gets me to push that extra mile, is probably a fear in some ways of squandering what I've been given. And so I think even before faith was important to me, I didn't want to, call it the pearly gates or whatever else. I didn't want to be there and be like, looked upon as being somebody that was, had just wasted everything I'd been given.
I've got this terrible fear, and I've always had it, that I was going to come and go and not leave my mark on the world. And for many years, I kind of had this fear, but because I was young, I didn't really express a desire to sort of change things. I always thought I was going to do something amazing in life. I thought I was going to be, in the new Duran Duran, or I was going to be an author, or I was going to leave my mark somehow. But I just went on year after year after year, just realizing that I was an employee and I was doing the work. And when I left companies, 2 minutes later, they didn't even know that I'd been there, even though I'd been there for like 5 years previously. And it all came to a head when I was up in northern England, and there's a place in northern England called Hadrian's Wall. And it was built by the Romans many, many, many years ago to stop the Scots from Scotland coming into England. And it was like a protective barrier. And so you can imagine how old it was, because it's Roman time. And you can still see parts of it, and parts of it are pretty intact. Other bits are kind of really broken up. And I was looking at this wall once, and I was just thinking to myself, my God, some Roman soldier was told to put that brick down there, and he's left more of a mark on this world than I have. And it terrified me. And I just thought, what am I going to leave? What am I going to leave? Because people say you die twice, don't you? You die once in your body, and then when the last person that knows you dies, that's it, you've gone. And I just realised now that I can't allow that to happen. And I would hate to think that other people sitting there listening to this show are going to let that happen as well, because we've all got that chance in our lives to do something and leave our mark and make a difference to people. Simple as that. Make a difference.
Yep. No, I was going to ask you what what was the, was it the death of somebody, or was it, what was the spark that opened your eyes and said, hey, today's the day that all that's going to change? That's amazing. That's awesome.
My leap of faith was purely down to a miserable woman that I had to start working with. And quite simply, I just knew that every day that I was going to work with her was going to be a miserable day. And I just decided at that moment, and it was pretty cut and dry, it was within maybe 2 to 3 days, I mentally said, I can't allow one person to dictate my happiness anymore. I can be unhappy on my own. I can be poor on my own, but I can't just be taking a salary on a daily basis, allowing somebody to make me unhappy. And it was as simple as that.
How long ago was that?
That was June last year, and I'd been working for the company for 10 years, and I was going through the motions. I'll be honest, it was a job. I was a financial trainer. I'd be doing training courses, and I could do them with my eyes shut, and I could go in there, and they would say, would you build this course? And I'd go, yep, no problem. And within a couple of days, I was doing the course, and it was all very sort of go with the flow kind of thing. And she just made my life unhappy. And I would like to say it was deeper than that. I would like to say that I was driven, but I just knew that I had to do something. And when I took that leap of faith, I really didn't know what I was going to do. Certainly not this, but once I'd cut ties and I knew that I had to do something for myself, then I had to do something worthwhile. And I couldn't have just gone into something that didn't fill me up with passion and desire every single minute of the day. And I see that with you.
Yeah, well, my first thought is, have you gone back and thanked her? As weird as that sounds, she was her making you miserable. It sounds like it was the best thing that's ever happened to you.
I think if she's listened to these shows, the last thing that I'm going to be able to do is thank her.
Well, David, that will be my challenge to you, is to get to a point in your spirit where you can view her with a grateful heart, to say thank you for being placed in my path, because otherwise I wouldn't be making the mark and having tens or hundreds of thousands or millions of people being inspired. I mean, that's as weird as it sounds. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. That's the first thing that came to my head, was she actually was a blessing. As miserable as she might have been, that was, call it serendipitous or whatever else, but it sounded like that was, it paid some nice dividends for you.
It did. And the funny thing is, if you listen to one of the sort of very first shows, I was very, very tactful. And then once I got into the sort of middle, I was going, she was a cow. And I kind of, I had to sort of get it out of my system. And now I've kind of gone the other way again, and I'm a little bit more tactful, and I've kind of got it out of me, really. It's been like I've been in therapy for 150 episodes or whatever it is, and now I'm more calm by it. But no,
it's good for the soul to get it out. It's good for the soul to share and to talk and to This is your therapy. You're getting well paid to go through a therapy session, and probably to counsel everybody that's listening. It's a pretty cool thing.
I'm laying on a couch at the moment, and you're laying a wet flannel on my head, and it's and maybe drop a few grapes in my mouth while I'm doing it.
David, I hope we get to meet and hang out in person at some point in time in the near future.
It would be perfect. What I want to do is, what we're really talking about at this moment is doing something you love. And you quite obviously are doing something you love. And hopefully it comes across that I'm doing something that I love. And I want to play a very quick speech by a chap that we all know called Jim Carrey. And he said this recently, and I just love it. And it wasn't part of my original concept for the show, but now I play it all the time. So have a listen to this. This is Jim Carrey.
My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that was possible for him. And so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant. And when I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job, and our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
Now, that is hugely powerful, but it makes me think about your granddad, when you were talking about your granddad on the farm. Was he the kind of guy that gave you that kind of advice?
I think he actually was. Although he was a farmer, he took a risk in the 40s. And when nobody, I don't know if you guys have, I know you guys have auction houses for art and different things in the UK, but he was the first guy to ever start auctioning off land, like chunks of land, with no set value. So you could bid $1 or bid $1 million, but it was going to get sold. And so he was the first absolute auction and people thought he was crazy. They thought it would fail. It would never work. And it's now one of the largest auction houses certainly in Ohio, but one of the largest in the country. So yeah, he was a risk taker, very calculated as he got older, more conservative. But I got to hear some of the crazy stories from him when I was, from 15, 16 before he passed away. So yeah, he would have said, go, if you're going to fail, this is a famous quote of his, was bite off more than you can chew, and by God, you better chew. And so he was all about going big or going home, would have been his motto, for sure.
Well, what we've been touching on, and many of the guests have been coming up with this concept, and now I totally buy into it. But at the beginning, I would have gone, hang on, don't quite get this. And my mindset was in employee mode, and now it's in hustle muscle mode. And one of the things is go big and then go bigger. Basically, dream big and then dream bigger, because most people won't dream that big, and so you end up with less competition. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Absolutely. I think, I have a mentor about, you dream as big as you can, and when you get to the peak of that mountain, you see that there's a whole other mountain range that was out of view. And so one in particular, Tom Hill, who's written books and all kinds of different things, will tell you that you can't dream big enough. When you get to that 3-year or 5-year mark of goals, and he calls it an 18-month growth curve, you shock yourself what's possible. There's no question.
So why? It's a stupid question, this, but I'm known for stupid questions, John. But why do so many people not believe that? Because when you actually sit with somebody and they explain that to you, even my mind couldn't comprehend that was logical to begin with. But now it's like I've got new lenses in my eyes, and I just see the opportunities around me. But so many people don't. And I was talking to a chap the other day, and he said pretty much, he would say between 7 and 10 people are the walking dead, he says. These are the people that are not even going into jobs that they like. They're going into jobs they don't like on a daily basis. So that concept of dreaming big and dreaming even bigger would be so radical for them, they're not going to buy into it. And it's such a shame, because I could say this every single day to them, and they would have it in their ears listening to it, and you're saying it, and the next guest would say it, but still there's that kind of mental switch that they won't buy into it, because they're in that kind of situation that they just won't allow themselves to explode their chances of success.
Yeah, well, I think most, at least in the U.S., most public education or education and traditional education is geared towards teaching you how to go work for somebody else, and how to play things safe, and how to save 10% and put it in the mutual fund. And most of our society is geared towards the masses, and not towards people thinking big and thinking radical and thinking outside the box. Whatever cliche you want to use, we're wired, and it's almost kind of beat into us from an early age. And so I think, as much as I think education is important, I think a lot of what we focus on, at least in the U.S. and maybe the UK is very similar, is, get a safe job, go be a cog somewhere and make your, 50,000 or 80,000 or 100,000 or, and, just kind of settle for the typical American dream. And so it's after you hear it for 20 years, it's hard to rewire your brain. You have to be really intentional to surround yourself, and that, I think that's why the books and the people are so important to kind of rewire most people's thoughts around success and what's possible and all of those sorts of things.
Because I've created this new word, and I've been struggling with it for a while, and it's a new word that you won't have heard because I've invented it. And if it takes over the world, every time somebody mentions this word, I want a cut from it. And it's inspiration. Now, what inspiration is a cross between education and inspiration. And I think in the educational system, it's all about giving education, but they lack the inspiration. And every now and again, you get a teacher that you love. And generally, you love them because they are inspirational. And they have got just a different way of teaching you. And you look back on it and you go, that was a great teacher. But literally all the other teachers, I'm sweeping statements. I'm sure there's thousands and millions of great teachers out there. But certainly from my childhood, when I look back, I just kind of remember the lunatics and, the inspirational ones. So there must be a lot of kind of vanilla ones that just didn't resonate with me in any shape or form. And I can't even remember what they taught me or whatever. There was no inspiration to it. So I think we should have inspiration. What do you think?
I like the word mashup. I think it's true. I think I think the inspiration and just some of the basic tools of how to think, and but I think you're spot on that most teachers are they're overworked. The classrooms are too big. There's a lot of things that are stacked up against them, and then on top of that, they're not inspiring. So it's not a good situation. It's got me thinking about, with my own kids, homeschooling or doing something different, because I want my kids. I have a buddy who Cameron Harold, who talks about teaching your kids and inspiring your kids to become entrepreneurs, and he's got one of the few TED Talks that a Canadian ever has had on the TED website, and I think that. I want the inspiration. I want my kids to be inspired, and I want them to be inspired to learn the right kinds of things educational. So I like it. I like the direction.
Did you realize, John, now you've said that word, you're the first person that owes me money?
The check is in the mail, my friend.
I was waiting for you to say it, and I thought, I've almost got him. Yeah, inspiration. Yeah, it's a driving force for me, and it's interesting from the United Kingdom that so many American families do homeschool, because we wouldn't do that at all over here. I don't know anyone. Basically, if you keep the kids off from school, as parents, you're going to prison. It's our responsibility to push them into school. Very different, isn't it, in America, where you can actually choose to actually have your kids schooled at home?
Yeah, it's and some of the people that I respect the most are. I have one friend who he's got 6 kids and homeschooled, and I think a lot of people have a stigma attached to it because there's I've met some homeschoolers that are really weird, but I've also met some of the most brilliant people. They're 14. I mean, I've seen some TED Talks from kids that are 12 and 14 years old that are better than most of the best TED Talks of people that are in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. So I think the stigma is slowly going away because people are starting to see the results of parents taking ownership of their kids and understanding that the education of them, and that's one of the most precious things that you have. And if your kids and your family are your legacy, why would you trust that to somebody else that is making $40,000 or $50,000 or less a year, and they don't have inspiration on their side? So the homeschooling thing is I would say is catching on more and more in the U.S. by far.
But my kids wouldn't listen to me. Well, we have homework, and it takes us all weekend to do the homework. Well, I'm saying to them, look, just do the homework and you'll be done in an hour, and it drags on. The thought of actually having my kids, and every day I've got to get up and actually teach them, it would drive me mad, John.
Well, I think depending upon when you start with your kids, I think if you start early and it's all that they know, it's like anything else. Like my kids, my kids eat avocado and salmon and blue cheese, but they've been doing it since they're 2 or 1. And so if you take some kid that it's, let's say that they're 15 and they're not used to their parents, talking to them about education or whatever else, I think it's like any other person. Like there's a rewiring process, and there's a painful process of rewiring, whether it's our kids or ourselves or any of those sorts of things. I'm hoping, and this, I may be proven completely wrong on this, but I'm hoping that if I'm really active in their education when they're young, it'll just be a normal part of mom and dad. Like we travel together, we go to third world countries and serve together, and that whole education process is just a part of being a family that it won't be foreign to them. So maybe I'm wishful thinking and I'm off my rocker, and you're welcome to challenge me on that because my kids aren't old enough to be really engaged in that way. So
John, I'm not going to challenge you because you are the guest on the show. I will just say your kids will grow up to hate you. They will see you as the person that stops all their fun.
Come on. I mean, that may very well be, but I mean, traveling the world and instead of, reading about the Roman wall, like I want them to come visit, David Ralph and talk to him and come see the wall firsthand. And I want them to be engaged and, take ownership of their education. But I'm going to help expose them to some pretty fun things, whether they hate me or not. That's still very well a possibility. They may be like, no more trips, just send us to the frickin' public education and be done with it, Dad. No more teaching. So if that's the case, I will eat humble pie, and you'll be the first one that I'll reach out to.
You just put an apology letter in with the check that you're sending me. Save time and put them both in the same envelope, and that would be fine. We would have mended our burnt bridges, John.
Date it 10 years from now and say, I'm so sorry, David. I was so wrong. I don't know what I was thinking or smoking.
Like a weird time capsule. I'll be waiting for it. It will be perfect.
I love it. I love it.
Talking about going back in time and time capsules, I'm going to play the words of Steve Jobs now because it would be wrong not to play it on the show because, hey, the show's called Join Up Dots. And I am fascinated whether you believe in these words because I know we were touching beforehand on a very interesting concept that you've got based around these words. So it does sort of lead towards the fact that you do believe them. So this is Steve Jobs and we're going to have a quick chat afterwards.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college. But it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
Because you seem to me a big heart. You seem like a big heart with a big knife. Would I be right?
I would, yes, I would say so.
And so do you buy into the words that Steve says? Do you follow your heart? Do you go off the beaten path and have faith in yourself that it's going to end up all right?
Well, I think I believe in my heart, and I believe in, the soul spirit, that's inside of me. I also believe in a higher power. So he talked about karma or, believe in something bigger than yourself. I believe in a creator that, I don't think that we're all just here randomly and with chaos. So I think that they're, whether you call that the creator or God or Jesus or I think that there's something that's connecting the dots, and I do believe that to try to look ahead and connect the dots, he's spot on. Only in hindsight, only looking backwards, can you say that's why that happened, and that's why that happened. Oh, yes. I'm so glad that my heart was broken there, and I'm so glad that tragedy occurred because here's the other 10 things that came out of that. So I think Steve Jobs is spot on the connecting of the dots in hindsight for sure.
Somebody once said to me, then why can't we actually take those dots and turn them into goals? It was a different sort of point of view that they had. They said, yeah, I can look back on my life and I can connect the dots, but I believe that I can actually project those dots into the future and just follow them on. And I wasn't 100% sure about that. What do you think?
Well, I think that I do think that we have the ability to kind of, what we focus on and what we, you look at, the power of positive thinking and there's, been all kinds of books, Think and Grow Rich. What you think about on a day-to-day basis does come into existence. Now, it may not always come exactly as you thought it was or in the manner which what you thought it should or always in the timing, but in general, what you focus on, I think as human beings, we have that ability to kind of project into the future and kind of create before it happens. So, but I think that if you look at most people's lives, nobody orchestrates their life perfectly and connects the dots the way that they should. So I think, there's maybe it's a half truth to say that you can connect the dots ahead of time. and know exactly where you're going to be and what you're going to do. I think life has a tendency to throw curveballs at you and takes you in directions that you couldn't have planned otherwise. Because we live in a crazy, broken world, and there's other people that are involved in our success, not just ourselves. So, and controlling other people is, I haven't figured out how to do that. I don't know about you, but other folks tend to go a different direction than what I always think that they will.
If I could control people, I wouldn't have got married. That's the way I think. I learned a lesson on that one, John.
I can imagine. Marriage has a way of changing our views and putting a spotlight on our own flaws. And I've only been married for 5 years, but it's definitely rocked my world in the directions that I never thought I'd be going.
That's aged. For sure. Have you aged?
I would say actually I'm probably healthier. Definitely happier, but I'm more challenged. I'm more aware of, I think I was living in kind of maybe ignorant bliss before, and now I'm more self-aware, and the spotlight is on my character flaws and how much I have to grow. Whereas before I thought I had arrived, and I realize now that is not the case.
And that is a key point of being an entrepreneur, isn't it? Because we are on a journey, and we are going to send you back in time in a moment to have a one-on-one with your younger self. But at the point of when you are getting a family together and you get married and then the kids come along, then you realize that your time's not your own, and there's certain restraints, and there's certain kind of, you want to be at the school play, you want to see your kids at their sports day and all those kind of stuff. How are you going to balance that? Because having a 1 and a 2-year-old is very different. They just kind of get taken around. But as they get into 5s and 6s and 10s and 11s, then you will have sort of needs and requirements to balance your work. Do you think you're going to be able to do that?
I'd like to think so. I mean, I think, kind of coming back to, I'm surrounding myself with people that maybe have made some of the mistakes, or that can mentor me through some of those obstacles and challenges. I've met people that, I started having kids when I was, 29, or I got married when I was 29. I started having kids when I was 30. And so I think that, I've met some of them that have 4 or 5 kids, and they started having kids when they were 22, 23, and they've accomplished an enormous amount. They've lived amazing lives. But I think that you start to realize you can't, there are limits, and with those limits, you have to focus on what you're going to accomplish and pursue, and then what your family is going to look like, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And if that's really important to you, you better put in the time and effort. And then you have to say no to a lot more things than you're going to say yes to. And I think that's where I've been challenged the most is I was a yes guy. I love to travel. I love to try new things. And I've had to figure out more what's really important. And I can say yes to 1 thing, whereas before I would have said yes to 10 things. And so that ratio has been a little bit challenging and a tough pill to swallow at times, because I love to go out and challenge myself and experience new things.
You realize if you're homeschooling, you will never go out.
I will say that I've been told, once again, this is not from personal experience, that until the kids are like 4 or maybe in like 5th or 6th grade, you can get an entire day's worth of education in for like a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old in like 2.5 hours. Because a lot of school, I don't know about you, but I was bored mostly in school, in between, recess and cafeteria and half the things that they did. Like, they focus on the kids that don't understand multiplication, not the kids that have it aced. So I think that, I'm hoping that I can get things done between, let's say, 7 and 10, and then go about my day, until, let's say, 3 or 4, and then and still have a full evening. Maybe that's once again a pipe dream, but that's my goal. We'll see what happens.
It's a key thing, actually. You say that, and my mind was sort of whizzing in different directions, but. It's strange. You go through school, and yes, it's boring. I've been through school, you've been through school, and a lot of the time it's just boring. You just kind of think, oh, I wish I could be somewhere else. And I wonder if that's why when we go into jobs and it's boring, but we get paid to be there, we kind of accept it. We've been trained to deal with boredom when no one's paying us, and so suddenly we get a salary on it. We kind of are more accepting of it.
I think I've never thought of it that way, but I think you're spot on. We've been it's been beat into us for 18 years to be bored, and so yeah, we probably, most people probably do accept it. And because I know, like, I didn't read that much when I was going through school. I just was able to get good grades on the tests and whatever else. But when I started reading because I wanted to and took ownership of my education and choosing to pay and go to events and conferences and retreats and seminars, like those times flew by. I mean, you go to an Anthony Robbins thing or something like that, it's like, 16 hours long and you can't get enough of it. So I do think that, we're very used to being bored and just kind of zoning out, which is, it was pretty sad.
We're changing the world in this episode, John. I think I think you aim for the White House. I'm going to aim for 10 Downing Street, and we'll meet in the middle somewhere. We're going to change things, aren't we?
I sure as heck hope so. It sure seems that way. I've gotten goosebumps a couple times on this call, and hopefully the people that are listening, are getting at least one or two goosebumps.
Yeah, and if Barack is listening, he's coming for you. He's coming for you. He's got his big knife already, and he's outside. Right, just before we terrorise Barack Obama into doing something terrible, I'd like to send you back in time, and this is part of the show where we send you back in time like a young Marty McFly to have a one-on-one with your younger self. And if you could go back in time and speak to the young John, what advice would you give him, and what age would you choose? So I'm going to play the tune, and when it fades out, you're up. This is the Sermon on the Mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the Sermon on the Mic, the Sermon on the Mic.
Little John, this is Big John speaking. You're 21 years old and you just started interning with Cutco, and I just want to share a couple different things that I think I hope and I wished I would have known at that key point. You have nothing to be embarrassed of. Sales is a wonderful, wonderful career. Being an entrepreneur and the risks that are going to come. Don't listen to the naysayers, whether it's family, whether it's friends. And don't take those insecurities that you have and try to become something that you're not. Don't try to build a company that has a ton of employees or that has big buildings to prove how successful you've become. Be okay with running the small, powerful, lean business that you have and representing a great product. I think that being embarrassed or thinking that you're not as good as the people that you've started to surround yourself with because you're selling fine cutlery. I'd highly encourage you to do two other things. One is look for partnerships immediately. Don't wait. It's one of the best decisions that you're going to make is to bring on a partner and to sell half of the company. Don't let your ego get in the way. Having a partner is going to be one of the best things that you can do. And so start looking for partnership opportunities early. You may feel insecure as a result of some of the things that are coming down the pike. And the second thing is, even though you can delegate and hire other people to do things, understand the financials of your business. You can cover a lot of sins with sales, but you can't cover all sins with sales. You need to understand the inner workings of the business. And even though you're growing super fast, take the time to slow down and understand some of those components. And the last thing is you're going to have some bumps and bruises related to some of the people that you're going to hire and maybe some people that steal from you and those sorts of things. But don't lose heart in humanity and let the few bad apples get you down. That's yeah, man, you're right, David. It takes me back memory lane and gets me a little emotional to think about some of those things.
That's what it's all about. John, just the last question before I send you on your way. Well, actually, question before last, I suppose. Do you think everyone that's listening can have a kick-ass life?
Absolutely. I think it's going to look differently for different people, but no question that that we were created to thrive as a human being, and I think that is available. At least in my experience, it's available to every person that I've met.
So how can our audience connect with you, John?
The easy way, email John at Ruhlin Group or go to ruhlingroup.com, or Twitter. My Twitter handle is just Ruhlin, RUHLIN. Or Facebook, or the common social media things that are available is all of the above.
John, it's been an absolute delight having you on the show. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots. And please come back again when you have more dots to join up, because I do believe that by joining up the dots and connecting our pasts is the best way to build our futures. John Ruhlin, thank you so much.
David, thank you.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice that every successful entrepreneur practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.